Hi, excuse the hair, the wind's blowing like crazy here. One thing occurred to me that I call myself a disruptor, but there's a bit of a responsibility living up to a title like that, so I need to give you a bit more explanation. So if we go back to around about 2006, I'd already written about 4 or 5 books, and I've come to the notice of a very venerable old chap, probably the preeminent Bible teacher of the day, David Paulson. Through a mutual friend, I got to send him my manuscripts, and he used to correct them for me before I sent them out. He suggested I write a book based on a tape series that he did called Degreasing the Church. I remember listening to those when I was a younger Christian and being very impressed and thinking one day perhaps I'd like to write about it. Well, here it comes, and David Pawson suggested I write a book, and he was even willing to give me the title for Decreasing the Church. Well, I didn't like the title, didn't use it, but instead I wrote a book on the subject of looking at how Greek influence has corrupted, or at least done a lot of damage to the church over the last 2,000 years. And it was the most amazing process of research that I went through, culminating in the book, How the Church Lost the Way, that David did help to edit. In fact, there's a whole chapter that he told me to take out. And in my innocence and perhaps a little bit of hero worship, I actually complied, and looking back I'm wondering if I made the right decision, but that's the story of a different broadcast. So what I looked into the influence of Plato and Aristotle, and I was absolutely amazed at my findings. And I have to say that book, How the Church Lost the Way, as old as it is, like 14 years old now, it's still hugely influential. And okay, this might sound a bit of boasting, but last week I was at an event, and 2 separate people came up to me within 5 minutes of each other to say, one of your books changed my life. And it was that book, How the Church Lost the Way. And in the end, I put the 2 of them together and left them talking about my book, which is a little bit surreal and weird. But yeah, that got me into being a disruptor. And I suppose the title didn't help, How the Church Lost the Way, because some people misread it as How the Church Lost its Way. The idea of the title is that the early church was called the Way, and all I was saying is, there's a huge difference between the church when it was called the Way, which is basically the church in Acts, to the church as we see now. From one denomination, as we say, the early church, to over 40,000 denominations that we have now. There has to be a reason for that huge explosion of denominations, and Greek thinking is very much at the heart of a lot of it, and it's an incredible story, and there's not really the time to tell it here, but the core of my disruption, in that led me not just to analyse what had gone wrong, but to say, well, okay, what is right, and how do we get back to how the church was 2,000 years ago? And that was in my following book called To Life, which is so I had How the Church Lost the Way, How the Church Lost the Truth, which were basically very destructive books looking at how Greek infiltration had got things wrong. And then the third in the series could have been called How the Church Lost the Life. But I thought that was taking it too far, so I switched it around and just called it To Life, which is an old Jewish, do you say bottoms up or cheers? Jews would say L'chaim, to life, and that's the title of the book, and that was a real game changer. For me, certainly, it's the first book I've written where I actually did research and came up with my own, I think, unique solutions and observations, and I was very wary about putting it out, but it had a huge response, and I know churches have been turned around as a result of reading this disruptive book, To Life. And the core of it is what I call Hebraic thinking. which I'll talk more about in future broadcasts. But Hebraic thinking is a contrast to Greek thinking. Greek thinking is allowing the structures that came in through Greek philosophy, through Plato and Aristotle. Hebraic thinking is to think in the way of Jesus and the first apostles, which is basically biblical thinking. If there wasn't any Greekness infiltrating the church, then we'd all be Hebraic. And what a wonderful place the church would be. There's a lot that's gone wrong with the church that would have been put right, would never have gone wrong to start with. Again, it's too much to talk about here, but it is an exciting story. It's a sobering story, and it is a disruptive story, because I'm finding it very hard to get people to read my books, apart from those who get it. It's almost like you need to have a light bulb moment in order to feel positive about what I write about, even though what I'm writing is founded on historical truth and real history. And if you follow what a lot of academics are saying in their long words and long theses, like people like N.T. Wright, for instance, who's has been writing about the Greek influence, all the stuff I'm writing about is true. But the trouble is, a lot of Christian writers, particularly theologians, know it's true, but can't see the damage that it's made. Well, I would say there's a lot of damage in taking a pagan philosophy and merging it with a biblical faith. I don't think that is right. I think it's the little bit of yeast that poisons the whole batch, and I believe that's what's happened, and more of that in future broadcasts. So, over and out.